3 months, 90 days. That's what the oncologist had said when Grace Martinez asked how much time she had left. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer, aggressive, inoperable, terminal. Most people would have gone home to say goodbye, to make peace with family, to spend their final days in the comfort of familiar surroundings. Grace Martinez had a different idea. She was going to spend her last months doing what she had always done, bringing hope to others through music, one song at a time. When she walked onto the America's Got Talent stage, she wasn't just carrying the weight of a terminal diagnosis, she was carrying the determination to prove that life isn't measured by its length, but by its depth. Simon Cowell thought he was about to judge another singer sharing their dreams. He had no idea he was about to witness someone transformed dying into the most powerful performance of living he'd ever seen. What Grace did in the next 4 minutes would challenge everything anyone thought they knew about strength, about hope, about what it means to choose joy when despair would be understandable. When her voice filled that theater, despite her failing body, when she sang about living while dying, Simon Cowell discovered that sometimes the most important performances aren't about what you can do, they're about what you choose to do with whatever time you have left. Let me take you back to the moments before Grace Martinez showed the world that mortality doesn't have to mean the end of purpose. Sometimes it means the beginning of the most meaningful work you'll ever do. It was Tuesday evening at the Dolby Theater in Los Angeles, and America's Got Talent was in the middle of what would become its most life-affirming season yet. The familiar energy buzzed through the venue. 3,400 audience members filling the red velvet seats, but tonight there was an undercurrent of something unprecedented. Word had spread through medical communities and cancer support networks that someone was about to attempt something that challenged every assumption about what terminal patients should do with their remaining time. Simon Cowell sat at the judges' table in his signature black t-shirt and perfectly tailored blazer, but tonight his expression carried more gravity than usual. The producers had briefed him about this particular contestant in terms that were both inspiring and terrifying. They'd explained that they might be witnessing someone's final public performance, not by choice, but by medical necessity. Sofia Vergara was unusually quiet, having been deeply moved during the pre-show briefing about Grace's condition and her decision to leave the hospital against medical advice to be here tonight. Heidi Klum and Howie Mandel were both subdued, understanding that they were about to witness something that challenged every protocol about risk management and appropriate content for entertainment television. Terry Crews had spent extra time preparing for this introduction, knowing that his words needed to honor both Grace's courage and the gravity of her situation. The evening had already been emotional, but everyone involved in the production understood that what was about to happen would be different. This wasn't about discovering talent. This was about witnessing determination, about seeing whether the human spirit could shine brightest when the body was failing. Backstage, Grace Martinez sat in the contestant waiting area, but she wasn't sitting comfortably. The IV port in her chest was connected to a portable pump that delivered pain medication. Her breathing was labored from the fluid that had begun accumulating in her lungs, and every movement required more effort than it should have for someone her age. At 32, she looked both younger and older than her years. Younger because her face still held the kindness that had made her beloved by the children she cared for. Older because terminal cancer ages you in ways that can't be hidden with makeup or positive thinking. Beside her sat Dr. Rebecca Santos, the head of pediatric oncology at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, who had both covered for Grace's absence and provided medical clearance for this unprecedented situation. Grace, it's not too late to reconsider, Dr. Santos said quietly, checking Grace's oxygen saturation levels on a small monitor. Your energy levels are lower than they were yesterday, and the stress of performance could what, Rebecca? Grace interrupted gently, her voice still carrying the warmth that had comforted hundreds of sick children over her 10-year career. Could kill me, I'm already dying. Could make me sicker, I'm already as sick as I can get. Could be dangerous. Rebecca, I've been living dangerously for 3 months now, dangerously hopeful, dangerously determined, dangerously committed to making my life mean something until the very end. The journey to this moment had been swift and devastating. Grace had been at the peak of her career, head pediatric nurse in the oncology ward, the person parents requested when their children were sickest, the voice that sang lullabies to kids who couldn't sleep because of pain or fear. Then came the symptoms she initially dismissed as work stress: abdominal pain, unexplained weight loss, fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. The diagnosis had come 4 months ago, delivered by an oncologist who had struggled to maintain professional composure while explaining that Grace's cancer was too advanced for curative treatment. "We can make you comfortable," he had said. "We can manage your pain, extend your life by a few months with palliative chemotherapy. But I need you to understand that this is not a fight you're going to win." But Grace had refused to accept that her story was ending. She had continued working until 3 weeks ago, singing to her young patients, even when she needed assistance to stand beside their beds. She had turned her hospital room into a recording studio, creating lullabies and songs of hope that the nursing staff played for other children when Grace was too sick to sing in person. "Music isn't just what I do," she had told Dr. Santos when asked why she continued performing despite her condition. "Music is how I process everything I can't understand, and if I'm going to die, I want to die doing what gave my life meaning." "Grace Martinez," called Maria, one of the production assistants, her voice unusually gentle. The entire AGT staff had been briefed on Grace's condition, and everyone understood that they were facilitating something that was as much final tribute as it was entertainment. Grace stood up slowly, using the careful, deliberate movements that had become necessary as her strength diminished. She wore a flowing teal dress that Dr. Santos had helped her choose, something that would disguise her weight loss while allowing easy access to her medical equipment. On her head, she wore a colorful silk scarf that covered the hair loss from chemotherapy while making her feel beautiful and confident. "Remember what we talked about," Dr. Santos said, standing to embrace her friend and patient. "If you feel short of breath, if you start experiencing pain, if you feel faint, stop immediately. The performance isn't worth risking your remaining time." Grace hugged Dr. Santos tightly, knowing that this woman had become more than her doctor. She had become her advocate, her friend, her partner in refusing to let cancer dictate the terms of her final chapter. "Rebecca, I've been preparing for this moment my entire career. Every song I've sung to a scared child, every lullaby I've hummed to a dying teenager, every time I've used music to bring comfort in the darkness, it was all preparing me for this moment when I get to use my voice while I still have it." She pulled back and looked her doctor in the eyes. "And I need you to trust that this isn't recklessness. This is me choosing how my story ends as a nurse, as a singer, as someone who believes that hope is stronger than fear, even when hope is all you have left." Terry Crew's voice carried across the theater with unusual gentleness. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Grace Martinez." The curtain rose, and Grace began the walk that would either be her final public appearance or her most meaningful contribution to the world. The audience's reaction was immediate and complex. Grace moved with obvious effort, her breathing audible even from a distance. But there was something in her bearing that commanded respect rather than pity. She walked like someone who had made peace with her limitations while refusing to be defined by them. Simon leaned forward, studying Grace with a mixture of concern and deep admiration. There was something about this woman that commanded attention not through dramatic flair or obvious talent, but through simple presence, through the dignity of someone who had faced the worst news possible and chosen courage over despair. "Good evening," Terry said warmly, as Grace reached center stage, where the lighting had been specially designed to be gentle on someone dealing with the physical stress of terminal illness. "Good evening," Grace replied, her voice clear despite the effort speaking required. "Thank you for having me here tonight. What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Grace Martinez. I'm 32 years old and I'm from Los Angeles, where I work as a pediatric oncology nurse at Children's Hospital. And what brings you to AGT tonight, Grace?" Grace was quiet for a moment, and everyone in the theater could sense that she was preparing to share something profound. "I'm here because I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and my doctors have given me about 3 months to live. I could spend those 3 months feeling sorry for myself, or I could spend them doing what I've always done, using music to bring hope to people who need it most." The silence in the theater was profound. 3,400 people were processing the reality that this woman had left her hospital bed to share her final months with them. "For 10 years, I've been singing to children with cancer, helping them find courage when they're scared, hope when they're hopeless, and now that I'm the one who's dying, I want to sing the same message I've been giving them, that life is beautiful even when it's brief, that every day is a gift even when you know the days are numbered." Simon found himself completely absorbed by Grace's explanation, beginning to understand that he was about to witness something that transcended entertainment and entered the realm of ministry. "So tonight I'm going to sing a song I wrote for my kids, the children I've cared for who didn't make it, and the ones who are still fighting. It's called Living While Dying, and it's about making every moment count when you know your moments are limited." "That's incredibly powerful, Grace," Terry said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure you're feeling strong enough to perform?" Grace smiled with the kind of peace that comes from accepting what you cannot change while embracing what you can still control. "Terry, I haven't felt strong in months, but strength isn't about what your body can do. It's about what your spirit chooses to do with whatever time and energy you have left, and my spirit chooses to sing." "All right, Grace," Terry said, stepping back carefully. "The stage is yours." Grace positioned herself center stage, but before the music began, she did something unexpected. She looked directly at the camera that would broadcast this moment to millions of viewers. If you're watching this and you're facing your own mortality, whether from illness, age, or just the uncertainty that comes with being human, I want you to know that the end of life doesn't have to mean the end of purpose. Sometimes knowing your time is limited makes every moment more precious, every choice more meaningful, every song more important. The music began, a gentle, hopeful melody that seemed to capture both sorrow and celebration, loss and gratitude. And Grace began to sing. Her voice, despite everything her body was enduring, was pure and strong, carrying the kind of emotional weight that comes from someone who has learned to find beauty in the midst of suffering. "I'm living while dying, breathing while leaving. Every sunrise is sacred when sunsets are near. I'm loving while losing, hoping while hurting. Every heartbeat's a gift when the end becomes clear." Simon's mouth fell open slightly. This wasn't just good singing. This was extraordinary courage expressing itself through music, someone using their final moments to create meaning rather than dwelling on loss. "They say I have months, maybe weeks, maybe days, but I have right now, and right now I'm alive. I'm singing while sinking, dancing while drowning in moments like these. That's how souls survive." As Grace continued, something remarkable was happening. Despite her obvious physical weakness, despite the visible effort each breath required, her voice grew stronger, more confident. It was as if the music was giving her energy rather than taking it, as if performing was somehow sustaining her rather than depleting her. "I'm living while dying, and that's not a contradiction. That's the human condition. That's the gift we're given, to find light in the darkness, to find hope in the heartache, to keep singing the song of being fully alive." The audience was transfixed. This wasn't entertainment. This was testimony, delivered with the kind of authenticity that made everyone listening feel like they were receiving a precious gift, a final lesson from someone who had learned what really mattered. Sophia was crying openly, recognizing the courage it took for Grace to share these final months publicly rather than privately. Heidi was leaning forward, completely absorbed in both the musical performance and the profound message. Howie was unusually still, understanding that he was witnessing something that challenged every assumption about what dying should look like. But it was Simon's reaction that was most profound. This man, who had built his career on technical critique, was watching someone use music exactly as it was meant to be used, as a bridge between human souls, as a way of sharing what words couldn't capture, as proof that some things are stronger than death. The children I've cared for, they taught me this truth, that courage isn't fearless, it's afraid, but it tries, that love doesn't end when the breathing gets harder, that music keeps playing when everything dies. As Grace reached the bridge of her song, her voice became more urgent, more passionate, as if she was trying to pack a lifetime of wisdom into these few minutes. So if you're listening and you're healthy and whole, don't waste another minute on worry or hate. Life is so precious, so fleeting, so fragile. Don't wait for tomorrow to celebrate. The audience was completely silent except for the sounds of people crying, understanding that they were witnessing someone use their final public moments to give rather than to receive, to inspire rather than to seek sympathy. I'm living while dying, making every day matter, turning sorrow to service, turning fear into song. And when my voice goes silent, when my story is finished, I hope the music continues. I hope love carries on. As Grace sang the final chorus, her voice soared with a power that seemed impossible given her condition. This wasn't just someone accepting death. This was someone celebrating life even as it was ending. I'm living while dying, I'm loving while leaving, I'm singing while sinking, I'm living while dying. The final note hung in the air like a prayer, and for several seconds the Dolby Theater remained in complete silence. Grace stood at center stage, breathing heavily, but smiling with the satisfaction of someone who had just said everything they needed to say. Then the applause began, but it was unlike anything in AGT history. This wasn't just appreciation for a performance. It was recognition of courage, celebration of someone who had transformed dying into the most powerful lesson about living. The entire theater, all 3,400 people, plus the judges, plus the crew, rose to their feet in an ovation that lasted over 8 minutes, but Grace could barely stand to acknowledge it. The performance had taken everything she had, and she needed to sit down on the stool that had been placed on stage for exactly this possibility. Terry approached her carefully, his own eyes filled with tears. "Grace, how do you feel?" "I feel like I just did what I was put on earth to do," she replied, her voice softer now, but filled with peace. "I feel like I used my voice while I still had it, and I hope someone needed to hear what I had to say." The judges were all standing, but it was Simon who spoke first, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't contain. "Grace," he said, and had to pause to collect himself, "I need you to understand what you just did." Grace looked at him from her seat on the stool, still catching her breath, but radiating the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've completed something important. You didn't just sing a song tonight, you didn't just share your story. You just gave every person in this theater and everyone watching at home the most important lesson any of us will ever receive. Simon's voice was carrying more emotion than anyone had ever heard from him in 20 years of judging. You taught us that life isn't about how long you live. It's about how fully you live. You proved that even when your body is failing, your spirit can soar. You showed us that the most powerful response to mortality isn't fear or despair. It's gratitude, it's service, it's using whatever time you have to make the world a little brighter. The audience was hanging on every word, understanding that Simon was articulating something profound about what it means to live with purpose. Grace, you came here tonight not to ask for sympathy, not to make us feel sorry for you, but to remind us that every day we have is a gift, that every breath we take is precious, that every opportunity to love and serve and create is not guaranteed. Simon turned to address the audience and cameras directly. How many of us have been putting off our dreams, waiting for the perfect moment, assuming we have unlimited time? Grace just reminded us that none of us know how much time we have, and the only moment we can count on is right now. He looked back at Grace, who was listening with the serene attention of someone who had made peace with both living and dying. Grace Martinez, what you shared tonight deserves more than just applause. It deserves to be heard by everyone who needs to remember that life is beautiful, that hope is possible, that love continues even when everything else fails. Simon walked to his golden buzzer, but then he paused and turned to his fellow judges. Actually, what Grace just demonstrated, this transformation of personal tragedy into universal inspiration, doesn't that deserve recognition from all of us? Without hesitation, Sophia, Heidi, and Howie stood up and joined Simon at their golden buzzers, tears streaming down all their faces. "Grace Martinez," Simon announced, his voice carrying across the theater, "you have just received a unanimous golden buzzer, not because you're dying, but because you're showing us how to live." All four judges pressed their buzzers simultaneously. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down on Grace, who looked up at it with wonder and laughed through her tears, a sound that was as beautiful as her singing, the sound of someone finding joy even in the most difficult circumstances. Through all the falling gold, Grace looked directly at the camera and mouthed the words, "Thank you for letting me sing," understanding that this moment would reach far beyond the theater to touch lives she would never know about. Dr. Santos appeared from the wings, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her patient and friend. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "not as your doctor, but as someone who just witnessed the most beautiful example of living I've ever seen." "I'm ready now," Grace replied quietly. "Whatever happens next, I'm ready." 3 months later, Grace Martinez passed away peacefully in her sleep, but not before her AGT performance had been viewed over 500 million times worldwide, becoming the most watched inspirational video in internet history. More importantly, Grace's final months were spent establishing the Living While Dying Foundation, providing music therapy for terminal patients and their families, proving that even the end of life could be the beginning of something beautiful. Her AGT victory performance, yes, she won the entire competition, was a song she recorded from her hospital bed called "Every Day is Everything," which became required listening in palliative care programs worldwide. But the numbers and recognition weren't the real story. The real story was in the thousands of messages the foundation received from people who said Grace's performance changed how they approached their own mortality, their own priorities, their own understanding of what it means to live fully. It was in the medical programs that began incorporating her philosophy into their terminal care protocols. It was in the ordinary people who stopped taking their health, their time, their loved ones for granted. Simon Cowell, permanently changed by what he had witnessed, redirected much of his charitable giving toward terminal care programs and end-of-life music therapy, understanding that Grace had taught him something more valuable than any business lesson he'd ever learned. Grace's story became a case study in medical schools and theology programs alike, demonstrating how dying can become the most powerful form of ministry, how accepting mortality can lead to the most meaningful living. 6 months after Grace's passing, Children's Hospital Los Angeles unveiled the Grace Martinez Memorial Garden, where her recorded lullabies play continuously for young patients and their families. But perhaps more importantly, they established the Grace Protocol, a program where terminal patients are encouraged to share their gifts with the world, rather than simply prepare for death. The lesson Grace Martinez taught the world that night is profound. Death is certain, but meaning is optional. We can choose to spend our final chapters dwelling on what we're losing, or we can choose to focus on what we can still give. Sometimes the most powerful performances come from people who understand that time is limited, that every moment is precious, that every song might be our last. Simon Cowell learned that being a judge sometimes means recognizing when someone isn't just performing, they're testifying, they're teaching, they're transforming their personal tragedy into universal inspiration. And Grace proved that the end of life doesn't have to mean the end of purpose, that knowing your time is limited can make every moment more meaningful, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is use your voice while you still have it to remind others that they're living while dying too. They just don't know it yet. The golden confetti from that night has been swept away. but the golden moment it represented, when a dying woman chose to spend her final months teaching others how to live, when terminal illness became terminal inspiration, when one person's ending became everyone else's beginning, continues to inspire, to heal, and to prove that love really is stronger than death, hope really is stronger than despair, and music really does keep playing long after the singer goes silent. In the end, Grace Martinez didn't just sing about living while dying. She lived it, she embodied it, she proved that the most beautiful response to mortality is not fear, but gratitude, not despair, but service, not silence, but song. And in doing so, she gave the ultimate gift. She reminded everyone watching that they too are living while dying, and that makes every moment, every breath, every heartbeat infinitely precious.